Hello and good afternoon, Just. My name's Lola and I'm part of the ADR UK commissioning team here to host this brilliant webinar on this afternoon based around the ADR England Community Catalyst research agendas. And this is part of our programme of work to support the launch of our ADR UK Research Fellowships 2025 or REF 2025, which officially opens today. So a little bit of background, first of all, of why we fund ADR UK Research Fellowships. So we want to enable policy relevant research using our ADR UK flagship data, which is underpinned by our ADR UK flagship framework. And this is to enable to support new users to this vital data that can be used to inform public and policy and practice. Our programme of work is open to all accredited researchers, and we want to build on previous and successful ADR UK research fellowships and their programmes of work. In essence, we want to inspire the use of the ADR UK flagship data and drive research that has huge benefits to today's society. The QR code there at the top of the page takes you through to the holding page on the ADR UK website that has all the information regarding this funding opportunity. And the reason why we put these webinars together is to inform anyone who's interested in this programme of work. We want to explain the scope of our funding opportunity and showcase the breadth and depth of research possibilities across the flagship datasets, but also help researchers develop feasible and robust research agendas based on what's in each flagship dataset. And through the kind of series of webinars that we've been hosting, we've got one more coming up after this, or you can rewatch the videos on our website, is enable engagement with those flagship dataset experts, but also those most informed around the use of admin data in research, and help answer questions you have on developing research objectives for specific datasets, or actually on themes around research areas that we are interested in as an organisation, but also society is interested in, which is why today we brought our two community catalysts together, our children at risk of poor outcomes and our youth transitions, as they have been doing vital and pivotal work within different spaces, looking at what is known, what is not known, and what is needed moving forward. So the ADR England Community Catalysts is a programme of work developed, designed and funded by us, aimed to build strength and strengthen the research communities around specific themes, such as children at risk of poor outcomes and youth transitions. We wanted them to create a supportive network with the aims of increasing the use of linked administrative data for public good, connect the completely diverse stakeholder groups, and generate transformative information to generate new insights to improve policy and practice. Our catalysts had the same main goals going into it, which was to build research communities, drive the use of administrative data, identify research gap, and support researchers, altogether driving transformative insights and looking at different ways we can plug knowledge gaps going forward. And quite a lot of their work that they've been doing is identifying what is needed, what we know, and more importantly, what we don't know. And this is why they're here today to present their evidence gaps. So you can think about them in terms of building research agendas, because their methods provide validity in what they're proposing and what they're presenting today. So I do want to welcome our first community catalyst to the stage. And we are very fortunate to have a number of members of the team here as being part of the presentation. So Lucy, would you mind revealing yourself? And I'm hoping the slides will be created and purposed in the background for you. Amazing. Perfect.
Thank you, Lola. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Lucy Griffiths. I'm based at Swansea University. Karen's unable to join us today, but I'm joined by Grace Bailey, who's also at Swansea, and Kat Tranter, who's based at Lancaster University, and both of them were heavily involved in developing the research agendas with Karen and I. So we aim this afternoon to give an overview of our agenda, which sets out our current research priorities. Of course, we hope this will be informative in terms of your own fellowship ideas and your proposal development. However, we would also encourage you to find published government departments' area of research interests, such as that published by the Department for Education, Ministry of Justice, Department of Health and Social Care, etc. So you can read more broadly to make sure your research has policy relevance. Next slide, please, Grace. So our research agenda is based on a comprehensive evidence review and a detailed national consultation with stakeholders. The review scopes studies using administrative data to understand children's involvement with children in need and child protection services and children looked after or in care. Studies that focus on relevant interventions from early help services were also included. So we identified 142 studies published between 2000 and 2023. And as you might expect, we saw a steep increase in the volume of work published in more recent years, coinciding with better data access. So we've summarized this evidence, and if you use the QR code here, it will direct you to the report. For the scoping review, we have a longer report and just a smaller summary as well that we've prepared. So the research team also consulted with a range of stakeholders between February and November 2024, and this was led by Kat on the call. We aim to explore the perspectives on current priority topics for children's social care research. So the research team interviewed over 30 policy, practice and academic leads across sectors of health, social care, education and justice, and as well as suggesting priority areas and opportunities, stakeholders recognise the need for further development of the national data assets. And again, please have a read of our full report if you'd like further detail. Next slide, please, Grace. So our agenda makes the following general recommendations for the research community. Of course, some but not all of these will be relevant to your fellowship applications. So they include that the need for the research community to deliver cross-sector evidence about children's pathways through services and outcomes. The need to deliver evidence that interrogates and informs earlier intervention and prevention, ideally, as well as improving the outcomes for children already in care. To produce collaborative evidence in both research design and analysis, but also in the use of national and regional data assets. I think that is the way forward. Of course, for the purpose of this current webinar, you'll be focusing on the national flagship data sets. And to accelerate the use of the flagship data sets and continue to develop these data sets so that they can be used to tackle neglected topics. Next slide, please, Grace. So our research priorities are set out as higher level statements, and they indicate the kinds of topics and questions that studies should address to fill important evidence gaps. You will need to complete further work to fine-tune the focus of your studies, of course, in respect of checking project feasibility and the relevant data sets to be used and their scope and quality. So these are the main topics we identified through our review and our stakeholder engagement. I've starred here the themes that Kat and Grace are going to run you through now. So these are the ones that we think are most easily explored currently with the ADR flagship data sets that are being advertised in this fellowship call. Thank you. I'll hand over to Grace. Kat, actually.
Thanks, Lucy. Apologise if you're looking for a video. You've just got a thumbnail, I'm afraid, today. So yeah, in relation to preventative services, this is something that the scope and review found there really is quite a lot of research using administrative data that's weighted towards children who are in care, which is of course incredibly important and delivers lots of very, very important insights about this vulnerable group in relation to the scale and characteristics of their needs. But the review found that somewhat insufficient attention is paid within administrative data research in this field to children's earlier involvements with preventative services, or we may refer to this as early help or early intervention. So by this, we're talking about children at that sort of prior to children in need stage of support within children's social care, or children in need, or children on child protection plans. This imbalance appears to be at odds, and this was discussed at length within our stakeholder consultation process, also with an emphasis on prevention by government and across lots of sort of third sector organisations. So there's a real sort of emphasis on the importance of preventative support for children in this field. This doesn't appear to be matched from what the scope and review found in relation to the admin data research which has been undertaken. In relation to the stakeholder consultation, this was also spoken about at length across sector in terms of how there is a limitation in relation to what data does exist currently, which is amenable to administrative data research, to be able to capture this quite complex and often regionally diverse landscape in relation to the services that are supporting children at these earlier stages, and how we are able to record and understand anything that's going on, really. But there are ADR UK flagship data sets, particularly eChild, and also perhaps some that are in development that Lucy or Grace, you may be able to highlight which ones they may be. But particularly eChild, which can be used to advance knowledge in this area at the moment. And it would be great to see research coming forward that does sort of use this. For example, our embedded fellow Eliezer within our Catalyst project is on a. He should shortly be published in a really interesting piece of research which directly uses eChild to look at children's earlier involvement in children's social care and how that is related to planned and unplanned healthcare. Yeah, so that's an example. Perhaps could I pop onto the next slide, please, Grace? And as Lucy's highlighted before with the range of our kind of key sort of research priority areas, family mental health, special educational needs and disabilities, and school disengagement were three areas of pressing need, which was discussed at length and frequently with significance by the stakeholders that we spoke to, and that's why we're stating them as such sort of priority areas for research. Stakeholders raised concerns about the overall burden of mental health need within families. So this was of course in relation to children's individual mental health needs, in relation to child waiting lists, etc., and the lack of specialised services. But there was a real sort of concern about parental mental health and how this may be relating to children's mental health within families, and what that overall burden looks like in the context of family stress increasing. Similarly, increased rates of SEND were reported really widely by our stakeholders across different sectors. So new research would be very welcome in relation to ascertaining the profile of children who would be classed as having special educational needs or disabilities, who also have involvement with children's social care. More understandings about how these profiles might compare to children who don't have involvement with children's social care, or how the scale of this or the characteristics of these children might change over time. New research is also needed in relation to school disengagement. This is something which was stressed as a huge concern, unsurprisingly perhaps for those who are aware of this field, by our stakeholders. Again, with a specific focus on what this means for children with children's social care involvement or early intervention involvement, and how this might be changing over time also. So stakeholders would also welcome research which captures interactions between these three sort of needs or vulnerabilities within families. That would be something that would be quite important to sort of grow our knowledge about in this area.
So we now have a really exciting opportunity to be able to explore dual system involvement. So that's how individuals interact across the criminal justice system, as well as family justice and potentially different systems such as education as well. Thanks to the new data linkages that have been made possible through the ADR UK flagship datasets. So these linked datasets really represent a major step forward in what we can do in terms of administrative data and research within children's social care. So the Ministry of Justice, linked with the Department for Education data share, opens up possibilities for understanding how experiences in one system may relate to outcomes in another. Similarly, the Data First programme links data across the justice system, so from courts to prisons and probation data, providing a really rich foundation for cross-sector analysis. And through these initiatives, ADR UK Fellows have already started to produce a range of data insights, which are available on the ADR website. And these showcase the kinds of analyses that are now possible. In particular, there's work by Katie Hunter and Anna Leyland, and they've begun to uncover really important findings about the interactions between young people's experience, particularly in children's social care, as well as in the justice system. And this type of research is really helpful in building a much deeper understanding of this dual system involvement. But we know from the scope and review and stakeholder engagement that this is a really underexplored area. And these key ADR UK flagship data sets really pave the way for future studies to explore in more detail individuals who come into this contact with multiple systems. So in terms of minority groups, this is a really important area that we've identified as needing much more evidence. So at the moment, we need to improve how we understand outcomes for minority and underrepresented groups within children's social care. Whilst we have some really strong descriptive evidence, much of this is based on blunt population categories, so we don't capture the nuance and diversity within these groups. And this really limits our ability to identify where inequalities or distinct experiences may exist. There's a clear need for more research that looks in detail at the outcomes for ethnic minority groups and UASC, so unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Particularly from our scope and review, we found the need for more research around placement stability, reunification, as well as health outcomes. And really this is needed at a regional as well as a national level. So the eChild database already includes more granular ethnic data, and this should really become standard practice across the data sets to ensure that we're having this more inclusive and accurate analyses. We also know from the evidence that's already been published that UASC, so children who are UASC status, are highly vulnerable population, and they really face multiple and overlapping risks. We've seen some really concerning patterns, such as later entry into care directly from the courts and straight into a care placement for some minority groups. But there's still a real gap in evidence, which highlights the focus on inclusion and exclusion in research, and really thinking about how we can combine these different data sources to build a richer evidence base. So this space really calls at the moment for collaborative effort to take this work forward, ensuring that all populations are properly represented in the evidence. As part of the community catalyst, we also feel that evaluation is a really crucial part of the evidence base. So it's really important in informing policy making and practice development. And without this robust evaluation, it's really difficult to know what's working and what isn't working and where improvements can be made. And administrative data has a real potential to support evaluation work because of its scale, its coverage, and the way it captures information over time. From our work within the Community Catalyst, we found that whilst administrative data can add real value to evaluation research, there is the need to be mindful of its limitations. So understanding where the data may be incomplete, what combination of data is most useful, and how it's best to be linked and interpreted. So there's a lot more work that can be done in this area, but the progress that has been made so far is really promising. So for example, there's some work by Will Cook, an ADR fellow, who's helped us move forward in our thinking and practice in terms of how administrative data can support evaluation research. And our standpoint as a community catalyst is that these flagship data sets have a really key role to play in strengthening the evidence base for evaluation. We've pulled together some useful resources that we think might support researchers who are interested in using these flagship data sets. So there's data resource profiles and data explain guidances, which provide summaries of the data sets as well as the content and its structure. The eChild resources, which you can find on the eChild website, have a wealth of different information, so how-to guides, code lists, as well as user guides. So if you are thinking about using the eChild dataset, it's really worth checking out that website. And Data Size Open Learning also has accessible training to build key skills in using administrative data for the research. So you can keep in touch with us. You can sign up to our newsletter via the QR code, where you'll be updated with the latest news, as well as insights and upcoming events from the Community Catalyst, as well as our partners. Thank you. I'm going to hand back over to Lola for Q&A.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you very much. That was incredible how you've put it together and how you've kind of built up this body of knowledge based on all of the literature research you did, working with the stakeholders and actually just understanding the demographic and the landscape and having all of that insight together. I'm looking across, I can't actually see any questions that have come in, but I would like to just maybe ask Kat just to potentially outline the kind of validity that comes from the stakeholder engagement when they're kind of working through, well, what do we actually need? This is what we know. This is our resources. What do we need to shape changes in social care practice and the policy that underpins it? I was just wondering if she had any thoughts that she just wanted to share with us.
Yeah. So sort of the validity of the collaboration, like using that approach, really. Yeah, I mean, my background's in social work practice, so I'm biased in terms of the validity of listening to practitioners and policymakers, etc. But we really wanted to, it allowed us to get very close and upfront to understandings of what are the huge concerns currently, you know, what are the concerns at the front line of practice of those people who are developing policies, who are working in charitable organisations, who work very, very closely with a lot of these very vulnerable, marginalised groups of children, young people and families, and also with the academics. It also allowed us to sort of go cross-sector, so we could sort of really sort of sense check the sort of the consistency of what was being said, really. So I mean, I think it was a really valuable way of, like you said, being able to understand the landscape and also tap into policy practitioners and sort of across sectors in terms of their understanding of the usefulness of data, of what they understood in terms of what they could access and what they would want to know, what data are they even aware of? Yeah, you know, so it was really useful to then pair that with what Grace found within the scoping review and put those two together. Yeah.
Thank you. And within the kind of the infrastructure of the Catalyst as well, you've got the buy-in per se of those who might be able to take any evidence forward if a researcher was to kind of be excited and wanted to take any of the evidence gaps forward as kind of mold it into research agendas, is there the kind of the pathways for them to interact with the catalyst going forward, and the kind of the community and the support and infrastructure to help increase potential impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've got a we've been fortunate really to have had funding to kind of have our Catalyst team and to help grow the community. So absolutely, we've got a community now of over 500 members that we kind of share information with, and recordings and insights, etc. But ideally, what we want is for these people to connect as well. So with our events, we hope that we are facilitating that. So yeah, please, if you'd like to join the community, then please do. The QR code's not on, of course, at the moment, but we'll share the link in the chat actually, so you can then join us.
Thank you. Steve, has there been any questions pop up in the chat? Sorry, I'm on the little screen.
Yeah, no worries. And people are already signing up, Lucy, because I've got a notification, so that's good. But there is one here from Andy. He said it's really interesting, thank you. So is there a minimum size or scale for the feasibility for research projects? I don't know if that's something that perhaps you could answer, or whether it's slightly off topic, but that is the only question we have at the moment. So
if I give my thoughts on that first, Lola, but I mean, I guess if the question is in relation to the fellowship application, then I guess the feasibility needs to be very much based on the obviously, does the data set that you want to use enable you to address the research questions? Checking the kind of actual variables. There's a process within this ADR fellowship application process where you can discuss with the data owners as well to check the feasibility. So apart from the actual data set or data, I would just make sure that timescale of your project fits the call as well.
Excellent. I think this has come up in previous webinars, and I think we might have covered it in the good application webinar as well, in terms of sometimes less is more, to enable a real sort of focused project that really, you have the time to actually complete, and can deliver real impact and outputs. So yeah, that's brilliant, thank you. That's all we've got, I think, at the moment, Lola. So
please do continue to write questions in the Q&A function, because we'll be opening up again at the end of the webinar for discussions and questions, because I think it's quite an opportunity to have both catalysts on this forum, thinking about research agendas, thinking about developing them based on their own work and our programme of work. So please do keep mulling over those questions and pop them into the Q&A. And I'm very pleased now to be able to open up the platform to our second community catalyst, youth transitions.
Hi.
And we have Pete. Hi, Peter. We've got Peter with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Right, so hopefully, can we see those slides? Everybody see those?
Yes, we can.
That's yes, perfect. Jolly good, jolly good. Okay, so thanks very much. My name is Peter Irwin. I'm Professor of Applied Economics at Westminster, and I'm going to talk to you very kind of similar approach to the other catalyst in terms of thinking about the research gaps that we have identified, which ideally need to be filled if government is to create policy, research informed policy. I'm going to give you a bit of insight into how we came across those gaps, or how we developed those gaps and those themes that we think are important for research. And I'll spend the last couple of slides talking to you about the training materials and other support that we've developed as part of our consultation with stakeholders, and thinking about how we better facilitate the research that hopefully you're going to carry out, and also more generally getting lots of other people engaged with the admin data. So the catalyst, the Youth Transitions Catalyst, is looking at very much focused on the post-16 kind of transitions, education to employment. I'll kind of go into detail about this, but essentially it's later in people's education and employment careers. Strictly speaking, our focus is on age 14 to 24, but as you'll see in a bit, we kind of go above that age group in terms of talking about, for instance, later life learning. So I will talk to you first a little bit about how we identified gaps and themes. So similar approach to the other catalyst, with a bit of an iterative approach. So ultimately, we wanted to look into research that had been carried out on youth transitions with a focus on admin data studies. And I say a focus, you know, we had to kind of put a framework around this. We did actually consider research more generally if it was outside of admin data studies, but ultimately we did a kind of first stage of the process and then used the initial findings from that as an introduction for interviews with a range of stakeholders across academia, policy and practice organisations, essentially going to them and saying, look, this is what we found in terms of what is out there and what people have been able to investigate up to now. We think these are the emerging gaps, and what kind of resources do you think need to be in place to help support individuals to kind of tackle those gaps, with a kind of implicit, well, explicit in the discussion of, have we missed anything? So kind of taking that first iterative approach, initial literature review, going out to a variety of stakeholder groups saying, okay, you know, what do you think of this? And then having second stage literature review based on that feedback, which got in 203 peer reviewed and grey literature studies. Some of you may not know what. So peer reviewed is classic academic peer reviewed journals, and grey literature is government reports or other kind of think tanks and so on and so forth. And also then somebody went off and kind of did a trawl of government, UKRI and other research agendas, just to kind of embed what we were doing in those wider research agendas, and just making sure that basically we'd taken into account all potential stakeholders in this process of scoping and figuring out where we thought the gaps remained. It was an interesting time to do this because it was the point at which the new administration came in. So there was a lot of things were changing, but hopefully, as you see later, I'll give you some examples, and our gaps and themes are still very relevant. In fact, yes, they're highly relevant at the moment, given the last month or so of government white papers and various other things that have been released. So the results-informed proposed research agenda, which I'm going to talk to you of, also the nature of support and training, and the programme of engagement. Just as a kind of example of this, I keep kind of mentioning this, but it did strike me when we were going through the discussions with stakeholders, even with researchers that have been looking in this area for many years, they would say, oh, I don't look at the post-16 transition because you've got to look at the individualised learner record, which is the admin data record for further education providers. So young people who are doing kind of technical, what used to be called vocational qualifications, would be in there post-16. It's a lot more of a challenge to look at qualifications and education pathways in the ILR, because somebody can be doing something all the way from level 1 below GCSE, level 2, they can be doing A levels, they can be doing BTECs, level 3, they could be doing higher level. So there's much more kind of variety and heterogeneity in the qualifications that people are doing, young people are doing. They kind of tend to move in and out of further education a lot more, as opposed to somebody who goes down the academic route will be in a sixth form college. They'll be in what we call the MPD, and that's much more straightforward. So this was one of the barriers to researchers just generally that we engaged with, and also practitioners considering that area, because it's just more complicated from an admin data perspective. And also this idea of actually lots of the young people that we're looking at, particular focus on young people who are from disadvantaged backgrounds who are at greater risk of marginalisation, they become missing from the admin data. And again, I'll pick up on this in a second. So essentially, this has had, as you'll see when we get to the final set of slides, this has had a big input into, okay, what kind of resources do we need to provide so that these are no longer barriers? And also, as you'll see in a second, they are key to our, right, if we can provide that support, we can overcome these gaps in the research and understanding that policymakers and practitioners need in order to support young people through these post-16 transitions. Okay, so that's how we got to this. I've got 2 slides on our gaps and themes. The first one, the best way to think of this first, and I'll go into the detail, this first slide is that all transitions, post-16 transitions, are in scope. So what do I mean by that? So from an administrative data perspective, what you can think is that in the administrative data sets, you can look at the experiences of young people from the point at which they do their GCSEs through the further education sector. That's more of a pathway for, you tend to find a higher proportion of young people who are lower attaining. We've carried out some research into that. You could look at young people who are going through the sixth form college or school sixth form into higher education. That's another pathway. That's a kind of, you need to use overlapping data sets. You could look at young people with mental health issues. They would be going through various pathways. In this first slide, we are saying, right, you could carry out a study which looks across the board of the experiences of, for instance, young offenders, and where do we see them going through those different pathways. So you tend to find that many more of them have experienced exclusion and are lower attaining, and therefore they tend to not go through the traditional A levels and onto university pathways. But in this first kind of slide, what we found was there is a real need to focus on the experiences of young offenders, those who've experienced social care, specific ethnic minority groups, and those with physical and or mental health difficulties, and essentially try and use the administrative data just in the first instance, theme 1, just to map the pathways that these young people take, and are they going down, focus on post-16 outcomes, are they going down particular pathways? Are they very kind of spread across different pathways? And what are the experiences of young people? Is it more advantageous for them to go down a particular post-16 route? Do we see lots of them experiencing dropout and exclusion? So looking at the experiences across all post-16 pathways, and I'll talk about specific admin data sets in a second, focusing on those particular disadvantaged groups. You can see a little bit of an overlap in terms of the groups that we've identified where there is some lack of understanding of experiences with the previous catalyst, but we're focusing on these kind of post-16 transitions. We've got theme 2, which is, as you see those young people who are at risk of marginalisation or at greater risk of marginalisation, as they move through those transitions, they are more likely to experience things like school exclusion, lower attainment, especially at Key Stage 4? Are there commonalities of experience across groups? Are we essentially looking at, for instance, those who've got physical and or mental health difficulties? And actually that's very closely associated with young offenders and those with experience of social care. It's trying to get an idea of shared commonalities of experiences, but also pathways which are associated with more or less successful transitions. So I'm an economist, so I come from a perspective of theme 3, what works? For young people who are, young offenders, experience of social care, etc., what works in terms of making sure that that 14 to 24 period of their lives secures successful outcomes in terms of their earnings, their employment, and good mental health, and a variety of other outcomes. So this first one is really saying, right, all transitions are in scope, and these are particular groups where we feel that there is a need for more evidence and understanding. Second, this is more looking at, so you could say all young people are in scope. So from all backgrounds, from, we're kind of not closing down. And what we're doing is we're looking at particular pathways. And there's definitely, and again, the admin data, the data are some of the challenges here. So pathways associated with disadvantage. So one of the very, very kind of policy relevant and very headline at the moment, this idea of young people who are not in education, employment or training, so they're NEET. So ultimately mapping pathways into and out of NEET. So if you think of, we are going to look at, myself and Dave Thompson are particularly interested in this area at the moment and looking into it, using the admin data to try and capture the experiences of young people for whom we see them at Key Stage 4, the year they turn 16, they then often disappear from the admin data record, or from a lot of the admin data record. So they're not on benefits, they're not in employment, they're not in education, and we use other, what's called the NCCIS. I mean, we haven't got time to go into this in detail, but we use other components of the admin data to try and capture the experiences of these young people who are in this really policy relevant group at the moment, the NEET group. Challenges and opportunities for admin data, missingness and via link data. That's kind of alluding to that, this idea that actually, if people are NEET, almost by definition, they're often missing from the admin data record or kind of key components of the admin data record. How do we overcome that? So that would cover all young people who go down this particular transition, which is associated with disadvantage. We've then got second chance mature learning, which is kind of going beyond our target of 14 to 24-year-olds, but we often find later life learners are having to undertake later life learning because of kind of issues around their achievement and their initial education and employment pathways in that 14 to 24-year-old period. And it is a real challenge with the admin data, but we can do some great things with this. We've done something for DFE just recently on this last summer. Work-based learning, a real challenge. That's in there as a kind of, a real push to try and get better data for this. Ultimately, we really would love to find out more and identify more in the admin data record about on-the-job training and other things like that. Ultimately, if it is not government funded, then it is very hard to get a handle on employers who are funding training out of their own pockets. This is something that is very important, because lots of people do learn in this way. And actually in the UK, there is a real gap in understanding in this particular area. Okay, so there are gaps and themes. That gives you an idea of how we came across these. This gives you our gaps and themes. First theme is specific groups at risk of marginalisation, and thinking what pathways, what post-16 pathways do they experience? And then the second one, thinking actually there are particular pathways where we see young people who, if they go down that pathway, they're particularly at risk of marginalisation. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a bit of an idea of, I mean, this speaks to all of the gaps and themes that we've identified. But for instance, if I was developing something which was going to consider young people who are NEET, I would start by thinking, okay, so say I've got a bit more of a kind of specific, I want to look at young people who are NEET in a particular area, or the issue of mental health, or other aspects of kind of risk factors associated with being NEET in that post-16 period. What I want to do is I want to show, to start with, that my research and my research question is really important in helping policymakers to understand the challenge and to therefore feed into the process of evidence-based or evidence-informed policy. So definitely, I've been reading these things recently. Actually, Get Britain Working white paper is now a year old, but essentially that's got a lot in there about what the government are planning to do. Just to say, anybody who knows about white papers will recognise that actually they're not really white papers. White papers tend to have specific policy in. These white papers are very much about the challenges. Those are either great things to read to say, as the government set out in the Get Britain Working white paper and the recent post-16 education, the skills white paper, young people are NEET. There's about just under 1 million young people are NEET. This is a real focus of policy. Mental health issues are seen to be a key driver. My research is going to look into and help inform that. It just shows an evidence that you know that you making the case that what you're going to do is very much going to help with this wider understanding of what the policy challenge is, but also evidences that that's where you come from. You do come from a practice-based, the previous colleagues were talking about, you know, bringing in practice-based stakeholders and thinking about what their challenges is. This makes it clear that you are really trying to help change things through your research, and it has relevance to those agendas which are trying to inform what is best to help improve the outcomes of these young people. I put the curriculum and assessment review in there. That came out this month as well. That's a good one to look at in terms of what training in education. There's a bit on post-16 learning there that I've been reading up on. So they're very core and relevant. There are other ones that are more general. So definitely the modern industrial strategy. I'm not wanting to be flippant, but every administration comes up with a new industrial strategy. Definitely have a quick look at it at the very least. DFE's evaluation strategy, not out of the question to have a little look at that, and Skills England, which their assessment of priority skills. I'm not saying you read all of these in detail, but these are the kind of things you can have a look at to show and make sure that, you know, what you're doing is relevant to that program of trying to change outcomes for these young people for the better. Okay, so which evidence gaps remain and what new insights do flagship data sets allow? I mean, this was a key kind of driver of our gaps and themes. Where are we still lacking information on these challenges, and what can the admin data sets do? Key possible, I've underlined possible because actually one of the things that you can bring to this is that you kind of have a look at the admin data sets, you look at these policy documents and think, actually, this data set can help inform this debate. So I've identified there LEO, longitudinal education outcomes, grade, MOJ. My colleagues have talked about some of these, so I won't go into detail. That you can click through to them there. They're the data sets where we kind of mainly see opportunities for looking at youth transitions, but please don't kind of close that down. I'm going to flag in a second, how am I doing for time? Not too bad. I'm going to flag our resources, and one of the resources we've got is something that helps you to click through and go, oh, okay, what's that data set? How can that help inform my analysis of youth transitions? There's about 21 data sets there. Okay, so let's get to the point where I talk about how we're trying to help you to do this. So we've already started creating some data explained guides. So there's a Leo guide on, this kind of relates to that problem or that challenge that I was talking about earlier, basically understanding post-16 learning spells and qualification aims with a focus on how you kind of get into the ILR, the individualized learner record. How do you kind of overcome that challenge? There's similar on identifying young people and studying young people who are neat in the admin data. Okay, they're missing from lots of admin data. How do you actually analyze them in the admin data? And there's 3 more coming out in the next few months, which are looking at geographic distance, which economists often use for what we call instrumental variable techniques, free school meals, IMD, which is social background, and also the mature learners one. So they're data explain guides. The prototype tool is that kind of website where you can go to, you can click through, and it gives you a little matrix, and you can go, oh, I want to look at the transition between further education and the labour market. You can click on that, and it gives you an idea of which data sets you might want to look at there. So that hopefully is a really helpful tool if you're thinking of researching in this area. Youth Transitions Resource Hub. This is the bit I think will be most useful to researchers who are at the stage of actually starting to kind of carry out analysis, or really thinking of the detail of variables, what type, which specific parts of data sets and so on. This is basically for those who know a GitHub. So ultimately it's got code, it's got all of those bits of code that we've created to carry out the analysis that again help people to overcome those problems of how do you merge the ILR and MPD in a way that kind of comes up with consistent education and training categorizations and so on and so forth. This is where SQL scripts and so on, this is where we share all of that stuff. And finally, or penultimately, I think, supporting data analysis. Please do get involved. This is the Community Catalyst link. We've got lots of training, various training things coming up. Colleagues at Data Lab have got something on the MPD. There's a UCL training program. We are, yes. So obviously we're very keen to get involved. If 100 people email us and say, oh, can we have a chat about can we talk about my fellowship application? We tend to do these through clinics and support kind of whole group things, but absolutely up for discussions of one-to-one if some of you want to have a chat about specific research questions that you're developing in this area. And we have got a range of clinics. So we've got some additional funding similar to the other Catalyst, where we are putting on clinics and events to support those of you who are looking at what we call quasi-experimental designs. So really trying to capture the what works approach, and thinking of kind of using methods that one can say, this is the causal impact of this particular intervention or this pathway or this route through education and training for these group of young people. Okay, so we've got, and again, click through to the newsletter and the Community Catalyst Hub to find out what is happening. And that's the QR code and various other things. I will stop sharing, but hopefully we can keep the slides up, or can we? The slides will be available. You can have the QR codes and all those things. There you go.
Thank you very much, Peter. It it's brilliant how it can all be pieced back together, and the offerings of the catalyst for those that are thinking about unpacking what their methods might look like, particularly when they're complex and it's a very different environment to what the normal academic picture looks like when you're thinking about developing a program of work for almost a different audience per se. It's not just about generating knowledge growth, it's generating knowledge growth for impact, whether it's at the policy level or the practice level. And it's really nice across the two talks we've had today, being able to kind of string that narrative together and really show the purpose for this type of research and highlight where extra evidence is needed, and signposting researchers to specific questions or specific areas and what kind of data sets. So it's allowing the kind of the puzzle to help them put that together, instead of just coming to the plate and saying, oh, there's funding, what do I do? It's like, well, yes, there is funding, but this is what's needed. This is what's going to drive an impactful application. We do have time for a few questions. So please, could I welcome all the speakers back onto the platform? It's usually the stage when you're in person. And Steve, do we have anything in the Q&A function or the chat that we could potentially unpack across the group?
Slow questions at the moment. I think everyone's probably busy typing them up as we speak. But there was one question about the review that informed the gaps. Could you share that? Is there a link available to that that you could share?
Is that me?
Well, yes, or in fact, both of you, both teams have done something similar, haven't you? So
yeah. So I, yes, absolutely, we will do that. I think actually, the other catalyst did have the link to the results, but yes, we can provide that. Yes, I mean, it's kind of through the link to the ADR catalyst, but I need to check if it's actually on that link or another. But yes, I'll have a look at that.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you. And
I was just going to just quickly on that one, Steve. In the chat, I did post our a link to our learning hub, the tile around user groups and communities. So that's sort of where you can navigate to the all the information and resources that the two community catalysts have been talking about, and both of their reports are there. And I've also linked that to the question in the chat as well, so from Sarah. So hopefully, yeah, those links are there, as well as in the slides, which should be published.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, there is another one here, and this is for you, Peter. And I'll just read it out. So, Peter, so you're confident that quasi-natural experiment studies to ascertain causality can be done through the data sets that you highlighted?
So, I mean, natural experiments are a subcomponent. So, quasi-experimental designs include instrumental variables, difference in differences, regression discontinuity designs. They have all been, I mean, currently my research team are carrying out various versions of this for MOJ, ESRC, and so they are things that we've used. There's also a lot of work that we're doing, which is kind of is looking at, for instance, heterogeneity of impacts. They're quasi-experimental designs. Natural experiments, I mean, one has to find the natural experiment oneself, and if you can find that, then you can have a look in the admin data to figure out if you can find the point at which, for instance, a policy turns on or off. One of the classic things that Dave Thompson has recently done, and which I was presenting on Tuesday as part of an NCRM webinar, is to look at, for instance, raising the participation age. and you look at cohorts of young people at Key Stage 4 and look at their post-16 experiences before raising and participation age, and compare to cohorts who are after the raising of participation age, do outcomes change and so on. Quasi-experimental there, a bit more debatable, because you're essentially using things like matching and so on to match on observable characteristics, but you can also do some quite funky things with other bits of kit that can get you a little bit closer to causal identification. So there are lots of opportunities there, I would say, for QED stuff.
Would anyone else like to come in on that question? No? Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Peter. Oh, another one has just come in. I am conscious of the time. And yeah, Michael says the techniques you highlighted is what he meant. So great. Okay, I think the questions have slowed up. Yeah, I think we can pass it back to Lola for a quick wrap up.
Thank you very much to both Community Catalysts and all the speakers we've had today, Peter, Lucy, Grace and Kat. We appreciate all of your time, and it's so refreshing to hear not only the results of our programme of work, but actually what it means, and the depth and breadth of knowledge growth is just huge. Again, Steve will share all the slides on our website. Please do join the Catalyst, even if you just want to find out more at this stage and you're not necessarily in a position to get kind of heavily involved. It's worth being part of these as they continue to grow. I just want to flag, I'm aware that there are different support mechanisms up and around for anyone who is developing research opportunity specific grant development programs, but for our ADR UK program there is the offering of a peer-to-peer support system for any fellow that is interested in our funded program of work to meet and interact with some of our current fellows, just to understand what the program's about, because we are aware that what are conditions of a funding application is different sometimes, because as well as useful research, we want people to engage with communities. We want feedback on the use of these flagship data sets, because the flagship framework is part of our program of work too, and we're heavily invested and heavily interested and see the huge value of each of the flagship data sets for informing impactful research. So please do sign up to this program if you are interested in that. And I also want to mention our mentoring program. So the ADR flagship dataset mentoring program is something that we believe in, something that our current fellows believe in, and that's why we've made it a standalone entity, as something that we hold and manage as part of our funded research. There is a cost associated with this, and you do have to write this into your application, and if you're successful you will be assigned a mentor based on your needs at the start of the program. If you do want to find out more about the ADR flagship dataset mentoring program, please do get in contact with us. And as of today, our full opportunity is live on the UKRI website. There are some webinars that are available for you to watch that have been previously recorded, and there is one upcoming webinar still to occur on Rapid. Other than that, I will say thank you very much for your attention today, and thank you again for the speakers for giving up so much of their time. We appreciate everything, and we look forward to working with the Catalyst going forward. So I know that's not the end of the road for us and the Catalyst, and I look forward to personally seeing what else comes out of them down the line. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.